The Spy is the most unique character in any FPS game. Almost. His gameplay consists of cooldown management, stealth, and getting kills. The way these things are handled are highly dependent on your loadout. You could build up crits and health with each backstab. You could play a bit more passively, or you can go extremely fast. Spy can be manipulated and changed in so many ways that he can fit pretty much anyone's playstyle. However, what mostly affects gameplay for Spy is his knife, and you'll mostly see the stock and kunai used. The stock knife is your basic knife. It doesn't have any gimmicks and it gets the job done. However, the kunai only starts you off with 70 health, and on a backstab, you can get up to around 200 health. Now it's pretty obvious why these are the two knives that are mainly used, because they're good in generally all situations with not really any gimmicks. However, the other knives are pretty great too, especially the Big Earner, which gives you a speed boost and some extra cloak on a kill at the cost of only having 100 health. Now, having only 100 health definitely seems better than having 70 like the kunai, but that puts you at a certain level where many things can kill you. A direct pipe, rockets from a kind of close range. You're very vulnerable still, and going fast means you're going to get killed fast. So this weapon really allows you to get more chain stabs, especially with that speed boost, since you're going to be able to reach targets faster, quicker, and pretty much anyone that's out of reach you can pretty much get to, as long as you see them. Now, it is a great weapon, and you have to really change your playstyle, because you're making a choice to either go for these stabs or try to use that speed boost to get away. And that's what makes it not really good for all situations, but it still can be used like any other knife. Now, the Spicicle is probably the closest knife to the stock knife. Now, when you're holding this out and you get set on fire, you lose this knife. However, you do get some buffs and benefits against fire. Now, this knife is good if you're trying to get away or you're just trying to get behind the enemy. However, you're not always going to have a knife, so this means you need to pair it with a good revolver. Now, stock, maybe the Latranche, but I wouldn't really recommend the Diamondback. Now, if you get some kills, yes, that's good, but initially trying to get behind the enemy doesn't work well when you're only doing about 18 damage per shot, so you definitely have to have a good revolver to pair with this. The Your Eternal Reward is considered a bad knife because it changes Spy's gameplay the most. By when you backstab a player, you gain their disguise. Now this means this weapon is good around sentries and large groups of people because you won't be undisguised automatically whenever you backstab someone. However, this does have a hidden downside, which is disguises can sometimes be slow. So for example, if you backstab a heavy, you can't go ahead and go backstab the pyro because they have a faster movement speed. Now, in situations like this, I would argue that it's better to change your disguise even though you're losing all your cloak, but you need to have the right watch, so you can't use the Dead Ringer because that's just it's gonna ruin you. So that means, in the end, you should be thinking about when to disguise, because you're going to have a disguise out the bat, because you can just replenish your cloak. So it's really changing Spy as a whole into premeditation on how you're going to do something, adapting to pretty much any situation which you get yourself in. Cloaking is your ticket to behind the enemy, and just right-clicking isn't going to make it that effective. There are certain tips and tricks that will allow you to make the full use out of your cloak. Spy has 3 watches and some weapon reskins in TF2. The 3 watches serve basically the same purpose of going invisible. Now, they do have some minor changes, but that doesn't really change how they should be played or used. Now, before cloaking, you need to know where the enemies are and where the front lines are. So this way you can cloak about 1 to 2 seconds earlier. Even though it is ideal to cloak as latest as possible, that gives you a higher and higher chance that you will be found out. So it's more optimal to cloak a second or 2 before, so you have a higher chance of surviving instead of just dying instantly while trying to save a little bit of cloak. Passing through the enemy team is probably the hardest part of cloaking. Now, you want to stay as far away from the enemy team while you're cloaking so you're not bumped, or any stray bullets, flame particles, rockets, anything. Anything that will hit you and they'll see you, and that defeats the purpose of your cloaking. So I would recommend staying far away and also close to map geometry, like a wall, because they're less likely to find you out if they do feel a bump. Now, if you're just out in the open, obviously they're going to find you. So you want to fit in with as much map geometry as possible so you aren't found out. Now, when you decloak, it makes noise, and the enemy can hear that noise. So if you're in a noisy environment, then I would say it's fine to decloak behind their back, but you have to make sure that enemies won't see you. So you should also make sure to be behind cover. Now, let's say there is no noise and it's very quiet. Now, I would recommend at least going quite a bit of ways away so they don't really hear it, and also always stay behind a wall, I would say. Because if they just turn around and see you, then you're going to get killed. Another important thing to note is that cloaking gives you a little bit of resistance against damage. So let's say, for example, a pyro lights you on fire, and you don't really think you're going to make it to that health pack. It would be a great idea to just cloak, and it's worth it in most situations to sacrifice that for that little bit of extra survivability. Trick stabs can be classified to pretty much anything like a matador, a stair stab, a corner stab, but most of the time it's not always like that, and things can get a little bit different from the usual depending on how good your enemy is and how good you are. Always the goal of getting a trick stab is to get behind the enemy, so you really have to think creatively when you're going to swing your knife and how you're going to move, you're going to position yourself. That all boils down to a lot of the key things that your enemy will do, and their instincts, I would say. Because your goal is to fake them out and make sure they don't expect. Because if they do, you're just going to get countered and die. Now, when you're going into a situation where you need to trick stab someone, you shouldn't be thinking, I want to do a matador here, I want to do a stair stab, because that's predictable and people have seen that. So I would say you have to use all your surroundings and pretty much take advantage of what you have to get behind your enemy and stab them. Now, obviously, a corner stab might work for one person, but it won't work for others. So you really have to think off the top of your head and how you're going to stab someone, because you don't know who you're going up against. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Yeah.